Hello and welcome back to the Not the Old Firm YouTube channel. My name is Ben Banks, here to look back on, back to reality for Scotland, I suppose. Perhaps the warning signs were there in the last sort of maybe few matches, but we've not really took heed of them. And again, Israel being the team that makes Scotland stumble. 1-1 draw at the Bloomfield Stadium. Dor Peretz's goal just on the stroke of half time, while on first viewing looked like a brilliant strike. On second viewing, and probably fair to say David Marshall looked back on that with a bit of regret. He's got plenty of credit in the bank with Scotland fans, but he will be pretty gutted at conceding such a crucial goal in that manner. And then second half, Scotland were better after a pretty abject first half. Ryan Fraser got the goal. Scotland were on top. It looked like they were going to push on and get that second goal, but few substitutions here and there, and the game was pretty much grinded to a halt 20 minutes from time, and it petered out. Scotland now playing catch-up in the World Cup qualification group, 2 points behind Austria after they overcame a minor scare against Faroe Islands. The Faroe Islands actually went ahead in that game, to the surprise of pretty much everybody in the European qualifying stage, but they eventually did battle back. Were 3-1 up by half-time, and the game was pretty much a non-event from there. And Denmark beating Moldova 8-0, and a pretty ominous warning for, I suppose, Austria and Scotland. They're probably the two teams who already at this stage look like they're going to be vying for second, depending on how Denmark-Austria goes on Wednesday. Denmark have got a 4-point gap on Scotland between first and third, where Scotland currently sit. Austria in second, 2 points above Scotland. Denmark beat Austria on Wednesday. Scotland beat Faroe Islands, and Scotland do go into second. And while that looks okay for the first qualification set of matches, 5 points from these games, you were probably looking for a minimum of 7 to give you so you weren't playing catch-up like has been the case for Scotland. But we'll go into all that in a wee bit. First half started with the usual 3-5-2. There were a few changes from the team that drew 2-2 with Austria last Thursday. Lyndon Dykes dropped out, and Che Adams made his first start. Like, he was really positive, one of the bright sparks for Scotland from this game. You had, who else came in? Cal McGregor came in for Ryan Christie as well, and Stuart Armstrong dropped out for Ryan Fraser, who again was very bright, more so in the second half, I think, as was the case with a lot of the team, to be honest. The first half, just did not work at all. The formations that both teams played were very different. Scotland went with the 3-5-2, which I think in recent matches, maybe not even recent matches, maybe last year, showed that it doesn't really, I don't know what it is, it seems to do okay defensively. Defensively, Scotland can manage to get these draws, these 1-eaches, 0-0s, keep games tight, but they don't seem to offer a hell of a lot in attack. It was a praise system last year because the results were going Scotland's way. The 1-0s were perhaps falling for Scotland. They were getting some decent sort of draws here and there, but international football against teams, I mean, Scotland are the third seed in this group, Israel are the fourth, and I think this is the sixth meeting between the teams since 2018, and Scotland haven't won in 90 minutes in 4 of those. They haven't won 3 of them at all, and the one that isn't won in 90 minutes was the one at Hampden last year in the build-up to the Serbia game, where it was 0-0 after 120 minutes and we needed a shootout to beat Israel. So, don't know what it is. They're a complete bogey team for Scotland, never mind a team we never want to see again. I think the reason we don't want to play them all that often is because it's not like, say we played San Marino 6 times in the last 18, since 2018. You probably like, let's play San Marino every 6 months. That sounds great, but you do not want to play Israel every 6 months. They've been a real stumbling block for Scotland. And now we've only got to wait until October for the next meeting. I'm sure we are all delighted to hear that Israel will play Scotland again before the year is out. Never mind in the next qualification campaign or anything like that. I think we've actually maybe got them in the next Nations League section as well, but let's not think too heavily on that. Anything to do with Israel. Ophir Marciano will come back to that Hibs dressing room and yeah, I can imagine him and Kevin Nisbet will have some decent catch-ups. And once they're back at training, but never mind my rambling, getting lost this at this early stage in the morning. Yeah, currently having nightmares about Dasan Solomon again, I think. But yeah, and the second half was much better. They changed to the 4. Kieran Tierney dropped in at left centre back in a 4 instead of a 3. And I don't know, for me, it just looks a bit better in a 3 as a left back, and a very good left back. Some might even argue the best left back in the Premier League this season. And he's been sort of shoehorned in at left centre back, but again, was absolutely brilliant. And Grant Hanley as well, to be fair to him, has also been fairly decent. Jack Hendry, again, fairly solid as well. Defensively, we are okay. I think it's going forward, and in midfield, we've got good players there. We've got McTominay in that midfield, who's proven he can be a goal threat at one end as well as being defensively sound at the back. We've got, I know he didn't start last night, but sure, Armstrong's a very good number 10. John McGinn's one of the sort of better players midfield-wise in the Premier League these days anyway. And even if you want to go and attack Andy Robertson, I know we'll get onto him in a wee bit. It's a Premier League winner and a Champions League winner with Liverpool. Kieran Tierney, I suppose, to a lesser extent, even though the fact he is very good going forward, he has been stuck in defence. Ryan Fraser got the goal in the second half to get Scotland the point again, very good. And Lyndon Dykes has shown he can be a real handful on the international scene. And Che Adams' debut after his pledging of allegiances was very, very promising. So there's a lot of good attacking outlets, so why is it not working? Steve Clarke, I think, needs to figure out a system that gets the best out of his attack as well. If you think of, I know the Austria game, they scored 2 goals in, but it was an overhead kick was one of them, and you're not going to score those every game. A lot of these games under Clarke, the 1-0 defeats after the Euro 2020 qualification, which in itself, that game against Serbia over 120 minutes was 1 each. Yeah, then the month before that, you had a couple of, I think, game against Czech Republic, and when we played Czech Republic B team or C team, was only 2-1. You had the Israel game back in September before you played them even in the Euro 2020 semi-final playoff. That was another sort of 1-1 draw. Then the next month, as already mentioned, it was a 0-0 draw. These games are all so tight. There's also many examples of, apart from when we've played teams like San Marino and things like that, and perhaps when we've played a team like Belgium and things like that, where perhaps it's been a bit heavier. The games have all pretty much played out a similar pattern. They've all been very, very tight. There've not really been many goals for either team in it, and it just depends on which way, the 1-0 or it just stays 1 each, or in the rare case of the Austria game, it was 2 each. But yeah, something needs to change in attack. We have got good attacking players, and it's just frustrating, I suppose, because you're already playing catch-up, and the group history shows that if you drop sort of points to the teams you're sort of seated above in the group, you don't really tend to go to World Cups and Euros, and that's why obviously we're going to the Euros this summer, but prior to that, we've not been to a tournament in my lifetime. So you're already looking at the possibility. I know it's only 2 games in, you can't just toys out the pram already. If Austria and Denmark even draw, I think that's probably the best result on Wednesday, and Scotland beat Faroe Islands already, it perhaps looks a wee bit more positive, because I think Scotland at least go level on points, perhaps go above Austria on goal difference, and they're only within a couple of points of Denmark as well. So it could look a lot brighter come Wednesday, but I can't help but feel maybe when we get to the end of this qualification campaign that we'll maybe look back on this game as one that perhaps got away, maybe even the Austria one as well. Scotland didn't really turn up for the first sort of 35-40 minutes, and again, happened in Israel game, so maybe that's something they need to work on. They need to work out how to get going in the first half, because the second half performances have been decent. If they were managed to replicate that over 90 minutes, maybe not the Austria game, but certainly the Israel game, they looked lost when Scotland came out in the second half, and perhaps you would be looking at a more positive outcome. But nevertheless, we are here with 2 points. Faroe Islands on Wednesday. Scotland should be winning that comfortably, but Austria showed, who, to be fair, looked, even though they're seeded above Scotland, looked of a similar level, maybe slightly better than Scotland, and Faroe Islands caused them some problems. And it wasn't exactly plain sailing. I don't think Austria took maybe the goal to wake them up a bit before they eventually went on 1-3-1, but they also didn't score in the second half. Now, albeit didn't watch the game, watched a wee bit of the highlights, but it did seem as if Austria did just take their foot right off the gas in the second half, and maybe if they had played a bit more high intensity, they could have maybe won by a couple more goals. But that's not to take away from Faroe Islands, who played fairly well in that match. So that will not be Stephen O'Donnell is called out for it last night, saying it's going to be a very difficult game. It shouldn't be a very difficult game, but as has been the case with a lot of these games, with the exception of like San Marino and things like that, and I think maybe you can, they're not quite as bad as that, but they're definitely not one of the big, it's not even as tough a test as Israel. Scotland should be going out and trying to make a statement victory, winning 4 or 5-0 to sort of, even though it would be against Faroe Islands, it would give the squad a bit more belief, it would give the fan base a bit more belief, because I think the feel-good factor from the Serbia victory in November is pretty much evaporated. Maybe not to the full extent for some people, but definitely for some people, the sort of feel-good factor from the high of winning that has sort of gone. We've not won a game since that. We've drawn a lot of games and we've lost a couple. So if you want to look at it over 90-minute performances, not won in 4 matches. So yeah, things, I think it just needs to be a bit more positive in attack. If they could get going in attack and keep the defence the way it is, then I think we could be looking a lot brighter. So hopefully for the Scotland national team that happens midweek. But that's all we get time for on this quick review of the Israel game. I hope you have enjoyed. We'll have another one of the Faroe Islands, as well as this we will have a look ahead to the Scottish Cup ties as the Premiership's teams get involved with that. And we'll hopefully have a couple of bits of interviews with people from Premiership level all the way down to perhaps some of the lower leagues as well that are involved in the competition this week. So do check that out when it drops on our website and on our YouTube channel, as well as our social media feeds, all down in the description. Right, thanks for watching, and until next time, take it easy.